All right, welcome back to Vuln Vibes, everybody. Glad to have you all here. And today, we're going to jump right into the WP Safe block.
Okay.
You know, our dedicated segment to all things WordPress security.
Sounds good.
And today, we're going to be taking a look at some of the latest critical vulnerabilities that have been popping up.
All right.
More importantly, I think we really want to try to sift through all the noise and see if we can pull out any kind of significant trends.
Yeah.
Stuff that you can actually use to help you keep those WordPress sites locked down tight.
Definitely.
I'm assuming everyone listening, already lives and breathes IT security.
Yeah.
So we're not going to bore you with the usual, MERE-ATNCK framework deep dives or get lost in the weeds of exploit specifics.
Right.
We really just want to cut to the chase, right?
Yeah.
See what's really going on, what matters, what's going to make a difference for you. So, as I was going through all the latest vulnerability reports, one thing that really jumped out at me was the sheer number of stored cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, specifically popping up in some pretty popular SMTP plugins.
Oh, interesting.
We're talking, like the big ones, Sendinblue, Amazon SES, even SendGrid.
Wow.
And the scary part is, these aren't some obscure, outdated versions we're talking about.
Right.
These vulnerabilities, they go all the way up to, their latest releases.
That's a bit concerning. What's going on there, do you think?
Well, that's the thing, right? Why are we seeing this pattern?
Yeah.
It can't just be a coincidence.
Right.
So, I started digging a bit deeper. And, it turns out that all three of these plugins, they're kind of suffering from the same root cause. Insufficient input sanitization and output escaping.
Ah, I see. Yeah, makes sense.
For this classic security blunder, right? But it's still happening.
It's one of those things that it's so easy to overlook. And you think, oh, I'll just use HTML special cars or something like that and be done with it.
Exactly. Everyone thinks that's enough.
Right. But it's often not the whole picture. To really sanitize input properly, you really have to take into account the entire data flow, right?
Yeah.
And apply these context-specific escaping methods. It's not just a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
So, we're not just talking about some theoretical exploit here, right?
Right.
These vulnerabilities, they're actively being exploited in the wild.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And for some of these plugins, we're talking about any visitor authenticated or not being able to inject malicious scripts.
Oh, wow.
That's a pretty big attack surface, to say the least.
Yeah, that's huge. It really just goes to show, that even what seem like minor coding oversights,
Yeah.
they can have massive security consequences.
And, and especially when you consider the sheer scale of the WordPress ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got millions of sites out there relying on these third-party tools, these plugins.
Absolutely.
So the impact of these kinds of insecure coding practices, it just gets magnified significantly.
For sure.
All right, so we've got one class of vulnerabilities here that are impacting this user-supplied data on the front end, right?
Yeah.
But let's kind of shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
And pivot to a different area of the WordPress ecosystem.
Yeah.
Let's talk about databases.
Databases, okay.
Specifically, there's this plugin called Yawave, and there was a SQL injection vulnerability that was recently disclosed.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And this one, it really highlights how crucial it is to understand every single point where user input is, interacting with your database.
For sure.
It's all about, minimizing that attack surface as much as possible.
Yeah.
In this case, the vulnerability, it's hiding within this ILBID parameter,
Yeah.
which, due to insufficient escaping, becomes this vector for SQL injection attacks.
Right. Yeah. That's a classic one.
And, obviously, the potential fallout from a successful SQL injection attack, it's pretty severe.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we're talking data breaches, potential website defacement, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I remember actually I was auditing this plugin a while back, super popular one too. Had over 100,000 active installations.
Wow.
And it had this really simple SQL injection vulnerability that could have exposed all of their users' data.
Jeez.
It's just a crazy reminder that, even those plugins that we trust and rely on, they can have these critical flaws lurking beneath the surface.
So, looking at these two types of vulnerabilities, side by side, is it just me? Or are we seeing some kind of a pattern of lax security hygiene, in plugin development? Is this something specific to WordPress, or is this a reflection of just a broader trend in software development in general, do you think?
It's a good question. I wouldn't necessarily say it's unique to WordPress. I think it really does speak to this wider challenge in software development where it's this constant battle between, like, speed and features
Right.
versus security. And often, security best practices, things like input validation, output encoding, parameterized queries, they kind of take a back seat to just getting a product out the door quickly.
And that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
Because even if we're like religious about updating our
Oh,
plugins,
right.
we're still ultimately relying on the developers to have built them securely in the first place.
Absolutely. You're putting your faith in their hands.
Exactly.
So it really is this shared responsibility. I think plugin developers really need to have a kind of a shift in their mindset,
Yeah.
and really start to bake security into every single stage of the development process. But users also have a role to play, right? Staying informed about these vulnerabilities, updating plugins as soon as those updates are available, and just generally understanding the potential risks involved.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, it feels like we've uncovered a pretty crucial takeaway, right?
Yeah.
The weakest link in your WordPress security setup, it might not be you. It might actually be the plugins that you're relying on.
Right. Yeah.
So the question then becomes, how can we, like, collectively, both as developers and users, work together to really raise the bar for security in the WordPress ecosystem?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
We got-
It's something for all of us to kind of ponder and think about.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, stay vigilant, everyone.
Stay safe out there.